So welcome everybody. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name's Anne Single. I am the CEO of the Patient Voice Initiative, and we're a patient organisation that believes that patients should be seen, heard and valued in healthcare decision making, especially health technology assessment. And today I'm with you on Yagara and Turrbal land. So I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and pay my respects to any First Nations and elders amongst us. So this afternoon we've called this webinar Top 10 Hacks for Giving Input to PBAC. And why are we doing it? Well, it's January and most of us really should be on the beach, shouldn't we? But in fact, we're not. We're here at our desks. And we know that next week on the 21st of January, the consumer inputs will close for the March meeting of PBAC. And so we wanted to hold this webinar just as a bit of extra support for everyone before that closing. And even if you haven't got a medicine of interest on that agenda, you might just be interested in some of this information today. So we've got quite an informal process. We're just going to have some questions and answers, and we'd love to have your questions in the chat. And actually, if our numbers stay low, we'll probably invite you to speak and ask your questions directly. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine. Just put them in the chat. So I'm really excited today because I'm joined by Patient Voice Initiative's President, Sarah McGorham. And I was about to introduce her, and then I thought, actually, I'd love Sarah to share with you, those of you who haven't met her already, a little bit about herself. And Sarah, I'd love you to share why you're interested in how decisions are made about what's on the pharmaceutical benefits list and patient community involvement in that work.
Oh, thanks very much, Anne, and thanks everyone who's joining us as well. It's lovely to see a few people here in January. I think January, especially at a time where we're all still warming up to the year, but also know that this will be recorded and shared beyond today's session, which I think will be helpful for a range of patients and community groups. So I'm as Anne mentioned, President of Patient Voice Initiative. I've come to the role very much from a lived experience background. I've been living with a rare cancer for 30 years. And I've been on treatments that have been listed on the PBS and also treatments that are not listed on the PBS, and gone through the process myself personally for writing submissions for the PBAC. So that was my first engagement with the process. And then beyond that, my husband's also was diagnosed with a rare disease. So I, as a carer for him and his broader community, and his broader family who are affected by the same disease, diagnosed around the same time, supported them in applications for treatments for their rare disease on the PBS. When he was diagnosed, there were no treatments listed, and now they actually have 3 treatments for Fabry disease, which is a disease my husband and his family have. So I come at it from a patient perspective with that lived experience of knowing what it's like, the emotional burden and of going through the process of making submissions, and also appreciating how life-changing the approvals can be, but then also from a carer, seeing the impact on my broader family, and then advocating for my disease more broadly, and appreciating the parallels and the common ground between what I've experienced, what people within my disease and my husband's disease communities have experienced, and so many other patient communities. The common challenges and frustrations and pressures and understandings, they are common to so many of us. So I went about it I think the long and hard way is to try to understand the process, And if only I'd known Anne and PBI at the beginning of the process, I would have been far more efficient, accurate, and possibly more influential in my participation. So that's what's drawn me to be so passionate about this process, as well as patient voice initiative as well. That's what's brought me into this part of work, and definitely is I find interesting, fascinating, and so important for the entire patient community, for all conditions and all patient communities.
Thanks, Sarah. And I feel we're so lucky to have you and to have you lead us so that actually others have an easier experience of it than you have had it. And we know on the call that everyone's going to have different experiences of what we're talking about today. So we've got a quick anonymous poll just so we have a sense of your experience here. So I'm just going to share that. Some of you will notice I'm operating without glasses today, so let's hope this goes well. I'm hoping you have a poll in front of you. Am I correct? Oh, thank you. I love a thumbs up. Thanks, Kathy. Great. So the first question is, have you ever given input to the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee about listing a medicine on the PBS? Hopefully it's easy enough to pop an answer in. We've just given you the 4. Now, I know that some people these aren't accessible to, and I apologize. We're still looking into how we can do these things so that they're completely accessible to everyone. Oh, good. Like immediately I can see we've got a good range, and we love seeing no, because great. We're excited to talk to you about it. Terrific. So the next question you should have coming through. Oh, okay, I'm behind you. So the next question is, how confident are you that you know what input to make to the PBAC about listing a medicine on the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme? We've got a lot of not confidence, we've got some confidence, and we've got some not sure. So that's great, good range. That's it, ideal for us for this session. And how confident are you that you know how to give that input? We've got some people who aren't confident about it, some people know about that area, and some not sure. Thanks for adding that in and taking part in that. You couldn't see those results, so now I'm sharing the results so that you can see what I was just talking to there. You can see good, nice, good spread. And what I'll do, just to warn you, is at the end, I'm going to ask those last 2 questions again. And that's just to see whether we were useful today. So thanks very much for that.
Excellent.
I hope I've turned all that off. Yeah. So, and that's really usual. You know, it's a funny thing. We spend a lot of time thinking about what patients don't know. That's just sort of, I think, this old habit of looking through the lens of healthcare and thinking about clinical expertise. And it makes us think of all the stuff we must teach patients. But what I really want you to leave here today knowing is that patients have knowledge, and you have huge knowledge. And this is really trying to work out which bits of that incredible knowledge you have are going to be most useful within HTA. So we're not going to try and teach HTA. We're happy to share information about it, but it's about finding out what's going to make the difference for us. And so I think I'm handing over to you now, Sarah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Anne. And I just really want to reiterate what Anne said there, is that every single patient has knowledge that is valued. And the more people I have spoken to within the process and even within industry, and the more people over the years I've spoken to, the more I realize and appreciate how important the patient's experience is valued in the process. It's not pushed to one side. It's incredibly valuable, and it's really, really important part of the process. So there are a couple of key elements to that process. And so I think to start with, perhaps, Anne, if you could maybe give us just an overview of how medicines actually get onto the PBS, onto the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. That's probably the critical first step, just to explain to everyone here.
Yeah, sure. So it's not something we all automatically know or think about, because it's actually usually only when something's not on the list that we would like to have on the list, so that we could have, the reimbursed, the lower cost that comes with something being on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, that we think, oh, I wonder how that gets on there. So the process to get on the PBS is roughly this. A company will bring a treatment to our market. So they want it to be sold and available in Australia. And to do that, they need to have it approved by the Therapeutics Goods Administration. So that's the Australian equivalent of the FDA. Now, if they want it to be on the PBS list, they need to do something else. They also need to submit evidence of its clinical and cost effectiveness, and I'll come back to that, to the PBAC. And the PBAC evaluates that evidence, and then it meets to discuss that evidence. And then it either recommends that something is funded on the PBS or listed on the PBS, or it doesn't recommend it, or it defers its recommendation. And that one usually means it's looking for more information from the company. Then once a recommendation is made, still not on the PBS yet, it has to go to price negotiation. And that goes on between the company and the department, because the Department of Health is who pays the bills here for the PBS. And then, still not on the PBS, then it has to go to the Minister of Health, so currently Mark Butler, and the Minister of Health can put items on the PBS, but he can only put them on the PBS if they have been recommended by the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee, so they've been found to be clinically and cost effective. And if it's more than a cost of $20 million a year, that has to go to Cabinet. So at the moment, when price negotiations are finished, our current Minister of Health follows the recommendation of the PBAC and puts it on the list. But the policy is that a minister can make that decision. And that last part of the process, post a positive recommendation, the PBAC advises that that can take, on an average at the moment, of around 5 months. So that's the potted history.
Yeah. It's there's a few steps to the process, isn't it? And so the listing on the TGA just proves its safety element, and then it moves into the next phase of the process. And then once it is on the PBS, that's when it turns into the magical $25 script that we all enjoy. Excellent. So on that, the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee decide the value of a new medicine and if it's sufficiently good value for money to be subsidised by the government on their pharmaceutical benefits list. Would you be able to speak more to that, Anne, as to just the value of the value for money element?
Absolutely. But I think it's Mel. Sorry, Mel. As I say, I'm operating without my glasses, and I will come back to that question. I just noticed, Mel, you'd had your hand up. Can I take a question now?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether there are ever any instances where the minister doesn't approve a medicine that PBAC has recommended.
At the moment, there aren't. Several of the last couple of health ministers have followed the PBAC recommendation, but historically they have exercised their right not to follow everyone. Yeah, so it's always an option. Thanks for that question. Really appreciated it. So going back to you, Sarah, so how does PBAC decide if something's actually going to be on that list? So it has legislation that guides what it can put and what it can recommend. And basically to do that, it's looking for something, that I'm just going to call good value for money, and we can get into what value means. But they use a process called Health Technology Assessment, or HTA. And I only mention that because HTA as 3 letters gets thrown around everywhere. And I just want you to know it's the process that sits behind how they make their decisions. And key part of this process is it's comparative. So it looks at the new medicine that the company has submitted evidence on, and it's comparing that to an existing treatment, which is also there in the evidence. And its primary focus is the data about clinical and cost effectiveness. So it's got data about the benefits and the risks, and also some economic analysis about value for money. So it will have data like randomized controlled trials data. Sometimes for smaller populations that doesn't exist, so trial data, and it might use economic models. And it's trying to work out that compared to this other treatment, if I spend this much money, am I getting more benefit? Are the patients getting more benefit for that? If we spend the same amount of money, what extra do we get? Or is it potentially then less expensive? But it has 2 different processes. One is called cost minimization, but I'm not going to go, actually, I'm just going to stop myself there from going into those 2 areas. We can talk about them later if you want. They're not key to the sorts of knowledge that patients bring to them, but they are, if you're really interested in the area, really happy to discuss those.
I can just see that Robin's raised her hand.
Thanks, Robin.
Sorry, I just had a little question that I'm guessing probably led on from Mel's question earlier about the minister, whether he recommended, medications all the time. Oh, sorry, whether he put those on the PBS. My question is, why does it take different amounts of time to get things listed on the PBS if they've been approved?
Yeah, so there could be a number of things happening there, and that's a really, really helpful question, Robin, because if you look into the information straight up, it looks like the PBS is a 17-week process, and it does run through a process, but even that can run around and around. So even the PBAC bit takes more than 17 weeks. And then to your point about the variation in time there, that's because it then goes to price negotiation. So PBAC is actually only saying if something's cost effective. Then the department and the company have to agree on the price. Now, the price cost was part of the submission. It's not suddenly a new factor, but, it's a procurement negotiation. And the other things they have to do, they have to ensure they've got supply for it. There's a number of other items, it has to be listed and appropriately with people like Services Australia. So there's a large amount of administrative work. But when something's really taking time there, it's usually that price negotiation that's the issue. And we've seen that become more of a focus, particularly in the last year. We've heard from a lot of patient organizations this is taking longer than before. And we've also heard from people saying once upon a time as a patient organization, as soon as PBAC recommended something, we let all the community know and we celebrated. But now, because of how long this price negotiation is currently taking, we're being more careful with our communities. We know we're through one hurdle, but we're not there yet.
Excellent.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks, Anne. That's really, really helpful. And it's a really complicated element of the process. But you've done a great job of explaining that in its simplest terms. So that's brilliant. Thanks, Anne. So I guess it comes to our next step, which is really an important part of why we're here, is what can we do as patients, patient communities, and our organisations to increase our effectiveness and in terms of engaging with this process. So over to you, Anne, on that.
Thank you. So it's really useful to look at this area because this is a little bit different to what a lot of organizations and what a lot of advocacy looks like in other areas. So that process that is being used there is being driven by data, it's being driven by evidence, it's being driven by information and expertise. And so, whereas in other areas, things like numbers and noise can help get attention and get the outcomes you're looking for, in health technology assessment, there's an inquiry that you really are answering. And that inquiry is really about what is the value from your perspective. And that might mean contributing information in a couple of critical areas, and they will be around the experience of your current treatment. They'll be around what people might hope for a treatment, or if someone's had access earlier, perhaps on compassionate access or clinical trial, had access to the new treatment, they might be able to speak to their experience of that treatment, and also about the condition itself. So what I would stress here is that already in the pharmaceutical company's submission, there is really detailed information about the condition, there's information about the treatments, there's the clinical data. So they're not asking for that in this input. They really want to know what is it that the community thinks about these things. So that could be what outcomes really matter. So maybe you haven't had experience of the new treatment, but you know what you currently struggle with on the current treatment or what's needed. And so you could speak to the outcomes that matter most, because clinical trials are driven by a primary outcome. That's what makes them really robust. But it means that sort of evidence doesn't capture everything that's really in the wider experience of living with a condition and managing it. It might be your thoughts around the comparator, the treatment that it's being compared to. Comparators have strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes they are the standard treatment that most people in the community are getting, but there may be people who aren't getting that comparator for good reason, and understanding why some people can't access the current treatment is really important. The quality of life information is really important. So quality of life evidence may be gathered using quality of life tools. But what are the realities of living with a treatment, with a condition, or managing the treatment? Speaking to what's required and why something else may be of interest there is really valuable, because you know that what people think a condition is and the reality of it are really different. And even though these committees are really experienced and have consumer members on it, they can't know every condition, and sometimes conditions have aspects to them that actually the patient community doesn't talk that much about outside of their community. It may be that not everyone else is really interested in mucus, so you don't talk about it that much, but it has some particular benefit. Or something like fatigue has some particular aspects that make it difficult, but people just understand there's fatigue. They don't understand the consequences of that. Another really important area can be communicating the pathway for diagnosis and care, because the committee is going to be thinking about whether they provide this medicine and they're thinking about the setting, and they're really keen. A big driver behind this is to have equity and to make sure that they can reduce inequity of access. And so knowing the different pathways and the variations in services around Australia, patient communities have great knowledge in this area about the realities, and that can really help. The consequences of starting and stopping rules, non-health benefits and risks. So there'll be lots of data in that evidence about health benefits and risks, but what are some of the wider implications, including issues of recovery process and sustainability of health? And one thing I often say to people is think about why small improvements have real world meaningfulness for patients. That's not always the case with a treatment, but sometimes a treatment may, on the clinical data, not seem to have a significant improvement over the current treatment, but there's something that patients have seen or experienced that would mean that small improvement means a lot. For example, I often give the example that some years ago there were dermatological treatments that as a percentage of the body didn't seem to have a huge improvement, but actually the patients pointed out that the improvement was on the skin on the hands and the face, and that really was very beneficial to them for getting work and overcoming stigma in their treatments. So those are the sorts of areas that can be really useful. I've just summarised all the ones that we know from the evidence and also from here in Australia.
Yeah. If I can jump in there and provide an example that I've seen in the Fabry community, their treatment went from enzyme replacement therapy, which was once a fortnight, and he'd have to take a day off work every 2 weeks to come home and have a nurse come to the home and have an IV infusion, and then he'd be in bed for the rest of the day. Was for the next evolution of treatment that was into a pill form second day. So I was able to capture the profound impact that had on our family, that he no longer needed to take that 1 day off a fortnight. He didn't have the fatigue, and that he could preserve his sick leave, and we could actually, and then the emotional impact on not being faced by, for our son coming home from school in kindergarten to have dad on an IV. So those elements weren't captured in the clinical data at all, but had a really profound impact. So I believe that they were impactful in including that as part of the process, which sort of touches on some of the elements you were sharing, Anne.
It's a fantastic example, isn't it? And I know we had a little bit of a glitch with the sound during that, but I think we caught it. I'm just looking around. And so that's a really helpful example. Thank you, Sarah.
Excellent. And thinking, the slides that we have?
We do. Yes. Thank you for the prompt, because I just keep forgetting to share them. So I really appreciate that. Now, so I'm just going to capture some of these first ones that we've been talking about. These are just a kind of key reminders. These are our hacks. So we've got 10 for you today. And they're just the reminders. And these tiles, if you ever want to use these with your patient communities, they're on our website and can be downloaded. If you can't find them, just give myself or Cecily a call or an email, and we'll just send them to you in an email. So we say, remember, they've got the clinical data, they've got the economic data, they've got information about the condition. So don't explain the condition, do explain that reality of living with the condition. Don't submit published literature and stats, they've already got them. But do submit the numbers that matter to you. So if you've got some information about the community, it might be your own numbers, or if there's areas that you think are really important around quality of life to your community, do put in that evidence. And you don't need to explain the treatment. They've got volumes there to read about the treatment, but you can explain that reality of having that treatment or not having that treatment. I'll just give you a couple more that I missed there. Another one is don't ask clinicians to do patient group input. It's really tempting. It's a medical area. We think, oh, our patient group has this access to this clinician. We don't need clinicians to put in the clinical data because the committee already has it. But we'd love it if the clinicians put their own input in about their own experiences, about the sorts of benefits they see and the sorts of issues they see for their patients. So stepping away from the clinical research to what they're actually seeing in their practices. And at the moment, it requires a written form, and I'll give you a caveat on that. So don't submit videos and avoid photos, but do ask the Consumer Evidence and Engagement Unit, and I'll give you their email in a moment. Do ask about non-written options if they're needed. Now, why not videos and photos? The committees run on written packs of information. And so if you send a video, perhaps someone in the Consumer Evidence and Engagement Unit can see it, but the meetings aren't structured in a way where they can watch the video. But what you can do is, if it's easier for someone to record their input by talking, you can always download the transcripts that we now get from our videos and send that transcript in. So that's a possibility. And if writing something is too difficult, you only need to dot points. But if that's that's not something you would do, you can contact the Consumer Evidence and Engagement Unit or Joe Watson, who's the deputy and also the consumer member, and you can talk to them, and they will take a transcript if you can't do a written form. It's absolutely fine. Your knowledge is valuable. They don't want to miss out on it. And I think I've caught up with the slides, so I've got 5 more hacks there.
Yeah, and I think just following up on what you said there, and is what's so important is getting your information across. And as Anne said, if you're, whether there's a language barrier or if you're unable to capture it in the form that is provided, don't let that be a roadblock, because your information, your knowledge is what is most critical. There are so many alternate ways that we can get your information into the process. And as Anne said, whether it's reaching out to us, reaching out to the Consumer Engagement Unit, or directly to Jo Watson, who's the co-chair herself, your information is too valuable to be left and put aside. So don't let that be a roadblock if you're unsure. And Robin, I saw you have your hand up if you wanted to jump in.
Probably not a pertinent question, but and you sort of mentioned don't go through the treatment and the kind of clinical stuff, and I guess I ask why on the PBAC form do they ask it like question 2, how is the medical or health condition currently treated?
Yeah, so they want to know, this question causes a lot of confusion. They want to know how you're experiencing it. So you have the condition or you represent a community. How are people getting the treatment? And why does that matter? It's that thing that it's not a test to see whether you know. It's actually because when you send in your comments, that might validate the information they've already got, like great, good, or it might highlight a gap, or it might say something contradictory, which is really important. And we don't need to worry too much about those things causing something to not go ahead. It just helps them, if they're going to recommend, understand who's going to be able to access it and who's not. And so often the way we think a health system has been set up to run, and then the experience we have as patient communities are really different. So that's why they want to know your experience of treatment or your community's experiences of the treatment.
It's really interesting to know, or for us to know, like, what does PBAC really want to know about this one medication that maybe is relevant to our community? Like, I'd love to just be able to say, just tell me exactly what you need to know. We'll get you just that information and not waste our time with any of the stuff that you don't need to know.
Excellent. So I am going to give you, seeing I'm not doing a good job anyway with my hack order. Where is it? Here we go. I'm just going to give you this, and I've popped another thing in. Okay. So on this slide, we've got two resources, because I would always say that it's good to find out what they want and to start to, you know, understand generally what's required in the area. But I would never put in a submission without talking to the Consumer Evidence and Engagement Unit. And I've got their email there. And we'll pop in the chat Jo Watson's email as well. So Jo Watson is the Deputy of PBAC, and they can actually see the application. Now, at the moment in Australia, we have this difficult thing where most of the time none of us have summaries in of what's in the application. So we don't know what it's being compared to. We don't know what outcomes they looked at. We don't have that much information about the benefits and the side effects. I would always say to you, as patient organisations, go and ask the company for that information. Many will be willing to share, and I think they should be willing to give you that. You're being asked for your thoughts on this, and only the company at the moment is able to provide that information. But you can contact the unit and definitely do this, and you can contact Jo Watson and you can ask what would be most valuable, what's not there that you're really interested in. The unit and Jo will have loads of questions or a key question that they're interested in, and you can save yourself a lot of time by doing that. So absolutely brilliant question. Thank you, Robin. It's great to know the basics. You can use our tools like the Patient Voice Hub there, which will remind you of all the things we talk about here. It takes about 15 minutes to read the topic on the on giving input to PBAC. But then when you're starting to get a feeling for the area, make contact with those units and find out what best to answer.
Excellent. Thanks, Anne. And yeah, thanks, Robin. So I guess that brings us to our next question of how we actually give the input, and perhaps integrated in with, are lots of submissions more likely to get onto the PBS list as well? So sorry, that's two questions in one, Anne, but perhaps if you could touch on how we actually give the input, and is 5,000 better than 2, or you know where that sits.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see there's a link in the chat, and we're also going to have a summary slide at the end for all these things. So if you're not catching them, you're doing something else at the moment, don't worry, we can send them all to you. But the first thing you want to do is go to the website, and you'll be able to see the survey form there for putting in that input, which has those questions like Robin just referred to. Now, at the beginning, there's a lot of stuff on that form. And what is it? They're just trying to manage. So they've got about 35 medicines they're looking at per meeting, and that makes sure that they're capturing the input for the right area. it asks for things like your phone number, and just understand that that's there mainly so that if your submission doesn't come through correctly, they can follow up. You know, sometimes they can see that part of it is missing and they will follow up. It's just there for security, and it does ask you also to declare your interests. So if you're a patient organisation and you're getting X from company X a year, or you're a patient and you got funded by a company to go and attend something or speak somewhere, put that in there, and don't be afraid to do that. It's not going to rule you out. It actually shows you're a professional, because all the other professionals have to do that as well. You can find there the full agendas, and you can also print out a copy in Word of the survey that's on the electronic website, so you can read through their questions. And so you can complete the survey on that website, or you can send an email with the information the way it makes sense for you to do it. And I was just going to say there, we always encourage you to talk to the unit, talk to Jo Watson, so that, you know, because you may not need to answer every question. You may just need to make a couple of key points. Don't feel that you have to give a lot of length. If you want to put information about your organisation, that's useful so they know who you are, but put it last. Put the things you really want that are really important and specific at the top. And so to your point then, Sarah, about so is lots of submissions, is that going to make the difference to getting something listed? No, this is where this is really different from other forms of advocacy. What will make a difference is the content. So what can they learn from you? So if all your community put in submissions, there may be lots of information there, but don't get trapped into thinking, oh, hang on, this group over here said they had 3,000 and everyone's, you know, saying that was a really good thing because they put in 3,000 submissions on this. That doesn't make any difference. It's not a numbers game, it's a knowledge game. So we have a hack there where we say, don't cut and paste, share what you know. Don't give general information. So if you do like a form letter, sometimes we do that in advocacy, right? We make a form letter and we go to get all our members to submit it. Don't waste your members' time and your time doing that with PBAC. They just want the information. So numbers in terms of submissions don't make the difference here. It's content.
That's great, thanks. And just following up on, I think it was a previous slide we had up that I was just going to add, was the element of the video and photos included, which I know you touched on, Anne. I've had quite a few people ask me about that as well. And just got some recent insights just into the value of that, as you said, the system isn't set up to capture that. And part of that is just, you know, the IT infrastructure to be able to manage huge amounts of the videos. But if there are really clinically specific reasons that you would like to show how a treatment could impact, for example, an example I was given was if a treatment can improve the amount of your mobility, sort of before or after the treatment, from going from sitting down to being able to walk upstairs, being able to capture that on a video or in photos is really valuable just in that context specifically. But a broader video for the sake of telling the story perhaps isn't quite as impactful and valuable, and perhaps not worth including. So if there's a really specific reason, have I captured that?
Yeah, I would say talk to them before putting a video in. It's going to take you time to do. And most video, usually we just say don't submit video. And you hear a lot of people quite, well-meaning say, just send your story. And I think, oh, your story is huge. So So it's about those specific bits of the story. And why do I say that? And I think sometimes I think we have to persuade that committee of our worth. And if they could see us and see what we lived with, they would just fund it. And I say to people, committees believe in your worth. You know, they're working hard because they think you matter. And what they're trying to do, whether you like the system or not, or whether it's got problems or not, what they're trying to do is make sure that health money is spent where it can get the best outcomes. Now, we're always up for a discussion about that, but when you're focused on the individual HTA, that's what you're going to. You don't have to prove to them that you matter. You do matter. That's given. And it's regrettable that these processes sometimes make us think, oh gosh, well, actually that drug is apparently really expensive. No, that's not, don't worry, they're dealing with that. You know, that's your system. You know, we have universal health coverage. So what this is about giving them the information they don't have about the value.
Great, thanks. So PBAC's really looking for specific information that helps them understand the value of the medicine from the patient's and carer's perspective. So should everyone get involved? Well,
we're asking Dorothy Dixers, aren't we? But thank you. No, don't get involved if it's not the right time for you. Don't get involved if you haven't got capacity or there's higher priorities for you. And that's whether your patient organisation needs to be focusing on something else at the moment. There's a lot of need, right? And it's individual and also for our communities. But if you have capacity and you think your involvement could be useful here, then it might be for you. But one piece of evidence doesn't change an HTA. It's looking at economics, it's looking at the cost, it's looking at the effectiveness, and it's looking at the patient stories. It's looking at this broader setting. So don't be hard on yourself. If you haven't got capacity to do this at the moment, then you haven't got capacity. And the thing didn't get funded because you took part and you weren't good enough. And it's not also because you didn't take part. It just is a number of things didn't line up to make it get funded. And I know this is a really hard stuff, and we can't say it enough. It's not all down to you. And I say it because I just know on this call, everyone are people who go the extra mile to make things happen. It's great if you can do it. If you can't, you didn't let anyone down. And so we have our final hack today, which is our number one thing we like to say: don't hold yourself responsible, do what matters most. Okay, so we're really interested in patient involvement in health technology assessment for reasons I could bore you with forever, but it may not be what you need to do at the moment. And so don't hold yourself responsible. You've got other things that matter. And I should give you our summary slide if you want to do a snapshot, but of course everything is also, we'll put it in the links and we'll send it out as well. I don't think I ever should be allowed to play with the sharing on these things again. Thanks for putting up with me. So those are all of those things. So just remember, it's about being specific. It's not about a petition. It's not about having clinical knowledge. It's drawing on your patient knowledge and your community's knowledge. And it's a choice about getting involved.
Now, I think and number 10, I know, as Anne said, is probably a really hard one for everyone on this call, because I think the nature of people who are involved in patient organisations, and if you're a patient yourself as well, there's that tremendous sense of responsibility and burden that you need to, if you give more, then others will benefit. So that one it is really difficult. I think for individual patients, and there's opportunities to then lean on patient organisations and perhaps contribute to their submissions, that there's real value in that, which can then reduce the burden on individuals. And then from a patient organisation point of view, there's in discussions I've had as well, is that there are also a range of items that come up on the agenda as well. Some that are new therapies that can have a big, profound impact. Then there's other items that are just small tweaks. So I think everything within all the patient organisations are about triaging where you're able to put your energy, what's going to have the most impact. So it's definitely a hard one, but the looking after yourself and your organisation is critical in the mix.
Oh, thank you, Sarah, because and we've gone into it there, but I wanted to draw on your experience there. I think sometimes it's underestimated, not just the physical burden of getting involved, but the mental burden, that thing about having to draw on your worst days and worst experiences to often on a good day. So we really want to make sure that people understand that choice and have some support around them. I don't know if there's any other tips there you'd give, Sarah. You've done an enormous amount of these and are still talking to us.
So I guess I can just share examples from some of the submissions that I've put in have been with absolute full gusto, that I've committed an entire day or week to. And others, when my health has been unstable, emotionally, I know that I haven't been able to even just face the form. At those times, I've actually reached out to, on one occasion, patient organisation, because it's a rare cancer as well. We don't have an organisation for our cancer type, but I've lent on Rare Cancers Australia, and they've supported me in the submission. Before they existed, I got my husband to do it, just so there was something captured, and it was brief, but it was a couple of dot points, but it was captured. And I do know that if they are searching for more information and they've got a small amount of information from a patient or patient groups, that they will reach out and seek for more information if they're searching for it. So even if you can only just put a small amount in, and that's the limits of your capacity, then that is still powerful, and they will reach out with the phone number you've provided, and say, you know what, this is really helpful. I think we could flesh this out a little bit more. Can you just talk to it a little bit more? So, yeah, I've lived through the pressure and burden, and the toll that it does take. But then on the flip side of that, have experienced the joy of treatments getting listed and lives getting changed because of it. So it's, I guess, the nature of the work that we all do, but definitely worth recognising that there are times when it's not possible, and that's okay. And it's about just, I guess, reaching out to your networking and working out another way around to try and achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Natalie?
I hope my technology is working for me as well, and sometimes it's challenging. But look, a quick question there. Thank you so much, both of you, for all your insights. There's a lot of learnings I have had as the patient and patient organisation with myasthenia gravis. We're a hot topic at the moment, so we've been really deep in HTA and PBAC the last couple of years. I just have a question that has been sort of on my mind through putting through a few submissions now. We've got some great anecdotal evidence, I guess you could call it, with that reference to the impact the condition has, and where treatments aren't meeting or sort of achieving what they should for quite a large number of our patient group. And we're a rare group, so there's only so many of us as well. But we reference sort of not being able to work, not being able to participate in community, society, all those sort of broader impacts of that refractory state of the condition, and we're hoping you do something there. But I always felt that I was never able to maybe capture that in a useful way. We'd sort of mention it and say, oh, yeah, it impacts us because we can't work, we can't sort of be independent. There's a whole lot of those sorts of impacts, and I guess quality of life can measure some of that. But I was wondering if those touch points with the economic analysis, all those other bits and pieces that feed into the whole process, would they be capturing those gaps? We're working on some patient-driven research that could be really useful for it, that shows sort of where I never thought we could kind of nail the evidence for it and say what it's as patients, but does it I think my connection's unstable, but that's any insights on that? Does it sort of get captured?
Yeah, so the answer is it depends, and often it isn't captured. And one of the things we're really passionate about is by the time you get to this form of decision making, so many decisions have already been made about a treatment, from the design of the trials to what's going to be collected there, what's actually going to go into the company submission. And then, so finally you get to this point about what the committee will look at. And I strongly believe that there's a real missed opportunity of getting data collected earlier. It's not a simple thing, and there's trade-offs. It's not just about the cost of doing it. It's about understanding what data is going to be really important when. But, certainly there has been work done where patients, for example, have not only shaped the trial design, so often that means we've got a population that looks more like the population that we felt was required, but also that something's going to be given in a setting that's going to improve the access. But then around how you capture quality of life. So I often point to the Project Hercules work, which is for Duchenne's, but is really there for a blueprint for others about building tools that better capture that quality of life. And then there's also work going on about just informing the economic model. So what domains are being considered? Now, there's different bodies have different methodologies, but even when you're putting your input in, I think it's useful to know what domains were considered in the economic model. And then you can comment on that. It might be, yes, and this is what these domains mean in real life, or something critical that's not in those domains is this one, for example. It may be that something around productivity. It can also be that for your wider work, for your community, that some of these could be good pieces of research to do for a range of work. And when you do that, I think it's really worthwhile talking to the different stakeholders, not just HTA people, but the different stakeholders, about what sort of data would be useful so that any time you put into developing that sort of evidence, because I do think what I call patient-based evidence, which is what we're talking about, I call that patient-based evidence. Sophie Vercoe and Sophie Staniszewski, some European scientists, developed that idea that it comes from within the patients. And I think that can be really valuable, but it's timely and costly. And so I think when you do that, bring together and do as much consultation as you can so that you get lots of returns on it. Because these are the real costs, right? These are the costs to the community. Sorry, lengthy answer, but it's a big piece, and I think it's definitely, to me, a transformative piece.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Now, I've got 2 minutes, and you're welcome to ask questions, but may I run my little poll again, hopefully a little bit more successfully than the last time. Actually, Cecily, are you able to make that go? Great having you on the call. Thank you, Cecily.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever send our contact, an email to our contact address, that's Cecily, who's on the end there. Yeah, we really appreciate her work. Now, while you're doing this, if you still feel not confident, I would love if you would email us, and I'm really happy to jump on a call with you. You know, maybe you were trying to do something else at the same time. Maybe the way we were talking about it today just didn't really resonate. Please don't be put off. We can jump on the call and also connect you. You know, if you're driving around and can't see some of these email addresses and things like that, just sing out. We're really happy to. That's our role, is to get this information out. Great. So, can we share those results, Cecily?
Absolutely.
Great. And thank you to the person who's really honestly put the not confident. Do get in contact with us. And I'm sorry it hasn't hit the mark for you today, but we can build on that. Really appreciate everyone filling in those polls. And I really appreciate everyone jumping online and taking part today. I hope it will help in the summer as you put forward submissions. I'm just going to remind you that the comments for the March agenda close next week, the 21st of January. I also really want to thank Sarah for joining us today. We're really appreciative of her leadership, but also having patient knowledge at the top of the organisation. It's critical to changing the way everyone views this area of values in decision making. And thank you for your questions. I also just want to thank our sponsors. We have a large group of pharmaceutical sponsors. For information, every year we write a work plan and we send it to everyone we can think of and ask them to sponsor us. And then our interaction with the sponsors is that we meet with them quarterly to share with them what we've been doing, but also to learn about how they're thinking about patient involvement. So we just like to be really upfront that we've received sponsorship. We develop our work plan with our advisory committee independently of our sponsorship, but we're super grateful to these companies for supporting us. And so I'm just going to check if there's any questions I've missed. Otherwise, I'm 2 minutes over and I'm going to let you get on with your evenings. But thank you so much for joining us all.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Really appreciate everyone joining us.